Hello, welcome to the program, Bring It On. My name is Robert Amon. In 2011, a general uprising swept through the Arab region. Until now, the region is yet to recover from that mass revolt against bad government and injustice. Egypt is one of such countries yet to fully recover from the stiff resistance of its people against tyranny and dictatorship. The Egyptian Revolution of 2011 began in January of that year. It was a diverse movement of non-violent demonstrations across the city of Cairo and major cities of Egypt. Protesters from different socio-economic backgrounds demanded the overthrow of the regime of then-President Hosni Mubarak, who ruled the country under emergency rule for 30 years. When the dust of that uprising settled, Mubarak stepped aside and handed power over to the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces, which conducted the first democratic elections in Egypt. The Muslim Brotherhood candidate Mohamed Morsi was declared winner and sworn in as Egypt's first democratic president in the country's history. Just a year into Morsi's tenure, the military has ousted the country's first democratic president following protests against the government of the Muslim Brotherhood Party, accusing Morsi of usurping power and wanting to Islamize the country. What does all of this portend for Egypt and indeed the rest of Africa?
And again, but people were also very wary of the fact that it was not too long ago, just yesterday, they had driven away a pharaoh. And then all of a sudden, the man that the people themselves had elected as a result of their, actions, seems to be adopting the tendencies of a pharaoh.
Yes.
So I think that panicked a lot of people.
Yes.
And then again, the issue of the religious tendency, of the Muslim Brotherhood being articulated by the Morsi administration was something that did not go down too well
with the people
yes. of Egypt. Yes. And so when he moved against the Constitutional Court, it was a move in the wrong direction.
Okay.
Because I think he had not gauged exactly the Egyptian political barometer.
Okay.
And perhaps was unable to have the right feel of Egypt, what they wanted, what they aspired,
for at the time.
And some of these things at the time.
Yes.
And so these were steps that he took that did not augur well for him.
There's something I really want to bring out, and that's the power of the people, the galvanizing power of the people. In Egypt, it took the people, to bring down the government of Hosni Mubarak. I mean, it's unimaginable.
We saw
why don't we see this kind of situations
we saw a little bit
in other
of that.
African countries?
You see, we saw a little bit of that in Nigeria.
Look at the situation in Somalia. Look at the situation in Zimbabwe.
Many countries in Africa.
I mean, in Nigeria.
Exactly, you're right.
I mean,
but we saw a little bit of what people's power could do, even in Nigeria. The January protest was key.
Yes.
You understand? And it was surprising and unprecedented that Nigerians could, as a body, as a unit, be galvanized so much to do what they did in January. And I remember I was one of those on the streets of Lagos. We are moving everywhere to make sure that there will be no movement in this country.
Okay.
My organization, the Joint Action Front. And I remember people kept on telling us as we moved with the NLC delegation and so on, we embedded with them. Moved everywhere, people, little children, old men, old women, and so on. We are saying, and kept on saying 65 naira or nothing.
Yes.
And then they kept on, also, one of the things they said that was also important was, they kept on saying, look, don't collect money from these people.
Okay.
Don't fail us.
Yes.
Do not betray us.
Exactly.
They kept on saying that. And I think one of the meetings that we had when we did a post-mortem, I reminded them that these are the voices, the opinions of the people on the street. We cannot afford to get them, to disappoint them. But what happened at the end of the day, the general belief that the leadership of Labour had sold the people out. And I think that was very, very, unfair. But again, that also helped, because I can assure you that if January did not happen in this country, the price of fuel that has been pegged at 97 naira would have been 150 naira, would have continued to climb. Do not forget that after that, several times, the government, through either their spokesman,
Yes.
Minister of Petroleum,
Yes.
or some other spokesman, or the president himself would once in a while, throw his hat in the ring,
Attempts,
on
yes.
the ring, they throw his hat in the ring to see what the people will do. And they tell us that there's going to be full deregulation of the petroleum sector. There is never full deregulation of the petroleum sector since this issue of deregulation started. They will tell you once it gets to 18 naira, once it gets to 32 naira, once it gets to 40 naira, that will be the full deregulation of petroleum pricing in this country. And they never get there because they keep on stealing. They have not done the needful. And the needful is to stop the leakages that we're having in government. Send those people who have been pilfering from the public treasury. Send them to lengthy years in jail. 20 years, 30 years, it doesn't matter whether he was a former minister, he was a former governor, and believe me, a lot of people will learn a lesson. But like you said, really, much more needs to be done on the part of the Nigerian people.
It's very
We have
important.
shown so much apathy and so much laziness and indolence.
Yes.
We have shown, and so we must realize that when the government collapses, and this is the key thing, both the guilty and the innocent, will suffer in this country.
Indeed, the guilty and the innocent will suffer when the government collapses, and that's why we are looking at the situation in Egypt so that we can provide some solutions and, of course, learn some lessons from what is happening over there. And Mr. Chike has been throwing so much light on these issues. But let's go back to Egypt, the situation right now. And the interim president, that's Adli Mansour, has offered a new hope of parliamentary elections. A timetable has been released, and the situation is...
I agree, but that can only work, like I have said, if he manages to bring all of Egypt together. They have a lot of work to do to bring people that are already aggrieved, seriously aggrieved, into the process for making Egypt, a better country once more. A lot needs to be done. It's not just by, pronouncements. People are really, really aggrieved.
Yes.
And so you don't want to make the same mistake again that Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood made by shutting out the door against some other critical segment of Egyptian, political, society. Yes. By also shutting these people out in a winner-takes-all arrangement. Yes. It cannot work, and that's why, earlier on I had talked about, one thing that could actually help the process, the fact that you have, a balance of forces on both sides. Both sides cancel each other out. So what it means by implication is that not one group or not one side will say, look, we are going to take it all. It's not a winner-take-all situation. If they have not realized it at this particular point in time, then it's a pity. But I want to believe that they have seen that every side, in this particular equation matters. And like the other caller said, is it the John that called? Fundamental mistakes were made. It's just like the same situation in Turkey. Turkey is a fiercely secular state. And the role of the military in Turkey always has been to defend the secularity of the state, which is also a constitutional responsibility. And they have always done that anytime. And so you want to believe that, like you said, you used the word, it must be an all-inclusive attempt, to try to solve some of the problems of Egypt at this particular point in time. We are
so much interested in solving the problem in Egypt right now. For me, the question really is, what are the lessons? What is the way forward, not just for Egypt, but for other African countries who have this kind of situations? Yet, though it has not blown out yet, but it's like a keg of gunpowder waiting to explode. What is the way forward?
The funny thing about this situation is that when it happened in Egypt, and people were warning about the consequences of Egypt and Libya and other countries where the Arab Spring was in full swing. Nigerian politicians were beating their chests, with a lot of pride, that in Nigeria we don't talk about longevity of governments because they are having successful elections in Nigeria. But it's not just about that. It's not just about Mubarak being in power for about 40 years or so, or the man in Yemen for about 22 years, or Gaddafi for about 30 years, and so on and so forth. That's not what it's all about. At all. It's about the activities of people who have been saddled with positions of responsibility, who are not responsible enough to discharge these responsibilities with fairness, you know, and in a way that is acceptable to the people. It's about a leader who believes that he has become a little god and that is in a position to think for the people and to decide for the people what is good for the people. And so that is what the whole thing was all about. It wasn't about longevity of Mugabe in government and so on and so forth. Yeah, because, I mean, if you talk about what happened in Libya, for instance, a lot of people will tell you that there was no business, that thing happening in Libya, because Libya was already far better than Nigeria.
Yes. Well, we've said so much about the situation in Egypt, and you know, as the situation looks like what is far from being resolved, one thing I want to say is that Egyptians must consider avoiding violence that could plunge the country into a civil war that would make Morsi's troubled tenure and overthrow look mild by comparison. You know, of course, there are lessons for other African countries and African leaders. We must confine bad government, dictatorship, and official corruption and tyranny to the dustbin of history. The legitimate will of the people is like a cyclone that sweeps everything in its trail. Our leaders must indeed take note. That is the much we can take on the program today. We've been looking at the political crisis in Egypt. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Achike. Thank you so much for coming on the program. And of course, we'll have another session next time. Bye-bye now.